You really think you belong here? My dad laughed, swirling his wine. My sister leaned in and whispered, just loud enough for the table to hear, "She smells like pig manure." I said nothing. I simply folded my napkin, placed it on my lap, and smiled. They had no idea. 5 years ago, I left the city in disgrace, the weird farm girl who dropped out of college to raise pigs. My name was erased from family holidays, scrubbed from Christmas cards. But tonight, they'd waited over a month for this reservation. They had no clue that the rustic fine dining experience they were bragging about on Instagram was mine. Then the restaurant manager approached, his voice calm but clear. "Welcome back, Miss Hannah. Your usual table is ready." Dad choked on his wine. That was the exact moment everything changed. And I'd waited 5 years for it. I wasn't always the girl who made my father choke on his wine. Once, I was just Hannah Clark, the middle daughter, the odd one out, the one who smelled like the wrong kind of ambition. Growing up in suburban Connecticut meant pressed uniforms, tennis camp, and dinner conversations about SAT scores and Ivy League pipelines. My older sister Lillian was everything my parents hoped for: straight, a student, Yale, bound, fluent in French by sophomore year. My younger brother was still being groomed for finance. And me? I liked pigs. Not as a joke, not in a kids love animals kind of way. I was obsessed. By 12, I knew more about rotational grazing and ethical breeding than most adults. While my siblings joined debate clubs, I volunteered at a small local farm. I spent my weekends mucking stalls, bottle-feeding runt piglets, and learning to tell the difference between acorns and barley in feed blends. My mother once said I smelled uncivilized. At 14, I announced I wanted to raise heritage breed pigs and build a business from it. Something clean, sustainable, honest. My dad didn't even look up from his Wall Street Journal. He just said, "That's not a real future. That's dirt in disguise." Lillian laughed. "What are you going to call it? Pig Princess Inc.?" I went quiet. But inside, I was already planning. I went to college like they asked. A semester and a half later, I dropped out. The day I told them, my father slammed his fist on the dining table. "You're throwing away a legacy for manure?" And my mother, always the colder one, stood up mid-sentence and left the room. From that moment on, I was erased. No more invitations. No birthday calls. Not even a text when my grandmother passed. But I wasn't surprised. In the Clark family, love had always been conditional, and I had broken the conditions. I took what little savings I had and leased 5 acres in rural Vermont. It wasn't glamorous. I lived in a trailer. My boots were second-hand. The pigs were my only family. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I was doing something real. And even though I worked 16-hour days in freezing mud, even though I cried some nights because the silence felt bottomless, even though I sold bacon at farmers markets for pennies, I never once wished I'd stayed. Because deep down, I believed something they never did. That honesty, labor, and purpose could build something beautiful. Even if it started with mud. The early years were brutal. I started with 7 pigs, all rescues from a defunct operation that had abandoned them in the middle of winter. I built shelter from salvaged wood and slept in the trailer beside them with a space heater that barely worked. Every dollar I made went to feed and vet bills. Every hour of rest felt like a stolen luxury. People thought I was crazy, the pig girl. They called me at the general store, half joking, half pitying. Even the local farmers rolled their eyes when I talked about raising pigs without hormones, without confinement crates, letting them roam in pastures and root freely. "Sounds cute until they tear up an acre overnight," one of them said. They weren't wrong. I made mistakes. I lost money. But I kept going. I documented everything. Every muddy mistake. Every sunlit moment when the piglets napped in hay. Every time I made something edible, from scratch pork belly with maple glaze, slow roasted shoulder with heirloom apples. I didn't do it for attention at first, but one day, in a moment of tired defiance, I posted a video on social media. What happens when you respect the animal? Real pork, real process. I filmed myself pulling fresh bacon from the smoker, plating it next to eggs from my neighbor's coop and greens I'd grown behind the trailer. I uploaded it and forgot about it. 3 days later, it had 2 million views. Suddenly, people wanted to know more, not just about the pigs, but about the food. How did you make that crackling so crispy? Where can I taste this? Do you sell it anywhere? An editor from a food blog reached out. Then a reporter from a regional magazine. Then came the email I couldn't believe. A small investor group out of Boston wanted to talk. They'd seen my content. They liked my values. They wanted in on something small, farm to fork, rustic dining with a real story. I didn't know how to draft a business plan, but I knew how to build trust. I invited them to dinner, right there at the farm, under a string of hardware store lights and mismatched tables. I cooked 6 courses from scratch, all with my own pork. They signed the next day. That's how the Honest Pig was born first, just a converted barn with 12 tables, later a full-fledged restaurant with a wait list. People drove hours to eat there. Some stayed the night in their cars. It was real. It was growing. I still mucked stalls every morning. But now, when I looked at my pigs, I saw more than survival. I saw a future one built not in spite of the mud, but because of it. We opened the first official location of the Honest Pig, 9 months after that backyard dinner. It wasn't fancy, just an old feed store we gutted and rebuilt with help from local carpenters and 3 college interns who believed in what I was doing. The walls were reclaimed barnwood, the tables handmade from pine, the chairs mismatched on purpose. There was no sign outside, just a small iron pig silhouette above the door. But what mattered was the smell. Every evening, as the hickory smoke rolled from the open kitchen and the scent of slow braised pork shoulder drifted out onto the gravel parking lot, people came. They brought lawn chairs when we ran out of seating. They waited 2, sometimes 3 hours, and they told their friends. I built the menu from everything I'd learned in the field. Pork chops with apple cider juice, crispy pig ear tacos with lime crema, house-cured ham served over skillet cornbread with hot honey. Everything came from small farms I trusted, including my own. No shortcuts, no frozen meat, no food that hadn't been touched by real hands. It wasn't just food. It was a statement. Food writers started showing up. One from Bon Appetit called it the most honest plate in New England. The New York Times sent someone a month later. They called me the Pig Lady of America. I laughed at first, but it stuck. Soon, I was getting offers to expand. Most of them were wrong big money, with big strings attached. I turned them all down, until I met Gloria Sandoval, a Latina entrepreneur who'd built her own bakery empire from scratch. She said, "What you've built is beautiful. Let's scale it without selling your soul." We partnered. I kept the name, the food, the vision. She brought the systems, the network, the discipline. Together, we opened the flagship location in the heart of Boston, inside a restored train station with vaulted ceilings and exposed brick. The kind of place my parents might visit and say, "This is real dining." It had a 6-month wait list within 2 weeks. We made Forbes 30, under 30. I was invited to speak at food summits and sustainability panels. And I still refused to put my face on the website. I didn't want the brand to be about me. I didn't need their applause. Especially not theirs. My family still didn't call. They probably assumed I was running some roadside meat shack. They had no idea their friends were posting selfies inside my restaurant. And when I got the email from my sister, dinner reservation confirmed, can't wait to celebrate my engagement with the family at the Honest Pig. I stared at the screen for a long time. They had no clue. They'd waited 5 weeks for that table. And now, they were walking right into my world. The reservation email came from my sister, Lillian. Family dinner to celebrate our engagement finally. 7:30 p.m., Saturday. You better show up, Hannah. You owe Mom at least that much. Attached below was the confirmation. Table for 7. The Honest Pig. Flagship. I reread it 3 times. They had no idea. They had waited 5 weeks for that table. Our flagship location was booked out nearly 2 months in advance for weekends. Lillian must have pulled every string she had to secure that spot. Or maybe she knew someone. Or maybe she just begged. But one thing was clear. They didn't know who owned the place. My name was nowhere public. I'd insisted on that from day one. No press releases with my photo, no features that mentioned my hometown or my family. I had built the honest pig to speak for itself. Now, it was about to speak to them. Part of me considered calling the manager and canceling the reservation. I could claim a double booking or kitchen renovation. But something held me back. Not revenge. Not even pride. Just readiness. I wasn't that girl anymore, the one who ran from their judgment, who cried quietly when they forgot her birthday, who pretended she didn't care when she was left off the family Christmas card. I had built something real, something loved, something good. If they were going to see me again, it wouldn't be at some awkward backyard reunion or polite brunch. It would be here, in my house, on my terms. Surrounded by everything they told me would never amount to anything. I replied to Lillian's email 2 hours later. Confirmed. I'll be there. I arrived 10 minutes early. Not through the staff entrance like I usually did. Not in my kitchen boots or with flour on my sleeve. I wore a clean denim dress, leather boots still dusty from the farm, and a faded corduroy jacket my pigs had once chewed a corner of. I didn't bother covering the scent of hay and smoke that clung to me. I wasn't here to pretend. The hostess smiled when she saw me. "Miss Hannah," she said quietly, with a knowing nod. "Let them seat me last," I whispered. "Just like any other guest." She understood. From the hallway, I could already hear the voices. My mother's clipped tone, my father's low hum as he read the wine list out loud like it was scripture. Lillian's high-pitched laugh bounced off the brick walls. I lingered near the sidebar, unseen, until the hostess gave me the cue. Then, I walked in. The table fell quiet for half a second, just long enough for all eyes to land on me. Then my father chuckled. "You really think you belong here?" he said, shaking his head. I forced a smile. "Good evening, everyone." Lillian leaned toward my mother and said with an audible whisper, "She smells like pig manure." I didn't react. I pulled out the only empty chair and sat down. My boots made a soft thud against the hardwood. My hands were clean, but not manicured. My hair was brushed, but still held a slight frizz from the barn air. I looked exactly like myself. "You could have dressed up a little," my mother murmured behind her champagne flute. "This is my version of formal," I said, pouring myself water. "I hope you can at least afford dinner," my father added with a grin. "This place isn't cheap." I nodded politely. No one asked how I'd been. No one said, "Nice to see you." To them, I was still the girl who threw her future into a pigsty. And yet, they had waited 5 weeks to sit at this table. 5 weeks to dine in a place I had built. They just didn't know it yet. Not yet. The appetizers had just been cleared when it happened. We'd gotten through a shared plate of pork rillette, own recipe, and maple-glazed bacon flatbread. They had no idea they were critiquing my creations. My mother pushed aside the pickled onions. Lillian scraped off the crackling. My father asked if the bacon was too thick for modern plating. I let them. Then, Marcus appeared. He was our general manager, polished, calm, and sharp as a carving knife. He approached our table with his signature grace, holding a leather folder in one hand. "Excuse me," he said, voice warm but composed. "Is there a Miss Hannah Clark at this table?" My father frowned. "Why?" he asked, immediately defensive. "Is there a problem?" Marcus turned to me, ignoring the question. Then he smiled. "Welcome back, Miss Hannah. Your usual table is ready in the side dining room. Would you like me to bring over the investor's wine list now or after your walkthrough?" Silence. Lillian blinked first. My mother's hand froze midair. My father choked on his wine. Literally. He coughed twice, then dabbed at his lips with his napkin, eyes wide. I'm sorry, what?" he asked. Marcus turned to the rest of them, still professional. Miss Clark prefers to dine privately when she visits the flagship. The back room was held for her. Shall I move this party there? No, I said gently, setting down my water. This table is perfect. My family stared at me like I'd grown tusks. You work here? Lillian asked, squinting. Are you managing or something? I smiled. Not quite. You know the staff? My mother asked, her voice cracking with confusion. I trained most of them. My father leaned forward. Are you saying you're what, assistant manager? Sous chef? I folded my hands. No, Dad. I'm saying I own this restaurant. The Honest Pig is mine. I founded it. I run it. I designed the menu you're eating. Every course, every ingredient. It all came from me. No one breathed. I thought this was some new trendy farm-to-table thing, Lillian muttered. You can't be serious. She's joking, my father said, almost hopeful. Marcus cleared his throat politely. Actually, sir, Miss Clark is not only the owner, but the executive chef and founder of our entire restaurant group. This flagship is the heart of our brand. The brand? My mother repeated. I turned to her. We have 7 locations now. Boston, Portland, Chicago, Denver. I opened them using pork raised from my farm, the one you called a patch of mud and dreams. The words landed like knives. You lied, Lillian whispered. You made us think you were struggling. No, I said softly. You assumed I was. But why? My mother asked, blinking fast. Why wouldn't you tell us? I looked around the table, at the people who had once decided I was only worth loving if I played by their rules. Because I wanted to see who you were when you thought I had nothing, I said, and now I know. Marcus, still standing by, spoke again. Chef Miranda would like your opinion on the heirloom rib rub, Miss Clark, before the team finalizes the spring menu. I stood. I'll be back shortly, I said, adjusting my jacket. Enjoy the entree. It's a braised pork shoulder meat signature. Then I walked away, leaving the table in stunned silence. I returned to the table 15 minutes later. They hadn't moved. No one had touched the entree, steel steaming, still perfectly plated. The air around them hung heavy with something I hadn't felt from them in years. Uncertainty. Lillian looked up first. So, it's all true? I nodded. My father sat rigid, as if trying to reframe everything in real time. You built all of this? Yes, I said quietly. From scratch. From the pigs you once laughed at. My mother adjusted her pearl necklace, her go-to gesture when caught off guard. But the funding, the operations, the growth, how could you? I worked 3 jobs the first year, I cut in. Slept in a trailer with blisters on my hands. Cooked on a single burner for farmers in the rain. I saved. I borrowed. I pitched. And I made every dollar count. Lillian leaned back. You could have called. You didn't have to cut us off. I raised an eyebrow. You cut me off the day I said I wanted to raise pigs. You called it shameful. You told people I was going through something. You said I'd come crawling back. We were worried, my mother said, but it sounded more like a defense than an apology. You were embarrassed, I corrected. You thought I'd chosen something unworthy, but you were wrong. I didn't choose pig farming instead of success. I chose it instead of your version of success. No one spoke. Funny, I added, how you all waited 5 weeks to eat at a place you didn't even know I owned. The same place you now say smells like manure. Lillian flushed. That was, look, I didn't mean. You did, I said gently. And it's fine, because it reminded me who I used to be to you, and who I'll never be again. My father cleared his throat, trying to retake control. What matters now is this achievement. Hannah, you've done something remarkable, and I think we all want to acknowledge that. I don't need acknowledgement, I replied. I need respect, real respect, not the kind that arrives only after a Forbes article or a reservation confirmation. There was a pause. Then Lillian asked, So what now? You cut ties forever? Let this dinner be the last? I looked at her for a long moment. No, I said. But from now on, everything changes. If we're going to have a relationship, it will be on my terms. That means no jokes about pig manure, no sideways glances at my boots. No more wondering how I can afford things. I think we can manage that, my father said, stiffly. I'm not finished, I added. They all stilled again. I don't want any networking favors, no investment offers, no guest invites to events so you can show off your daughter's restaurant. I'm not a family trophy now that I'm successful. I'm still the same girl who loved the smell of soil and hay more than silk and champagne. My mother's lip trembled, but she said nothing. And one more thing, I said. I'm proud of what I built, but I'm prouder that I built it without bending to become someone you'd finally accept. My voice softened. I'm here tonight not because I need your approval. I'm here because I finally don't. Lillian exhaled. Okay, she said quietly. That's fair. And, I added after a pause, if you'd like, I could host the rehearsal dinner here, as my gift. Her eyes widened. You'd do that? You're still my sister, I said. But let's be clear, this isn't about proving myself to you. It's about offering what I've built, on my own terms. For the first time all night, she smiled, a real one. Across the table, my mother's eyes glistened. My father looked down, almost ashamed. Maybe for the first time in his life. I'd like that, Lillian said softly. And I'd like to know more. About what you do. About how you got here. You'll have to come early, I smirked. I'll show you how to feed the pigs. She laughed. I just might. And in that moment, for the first time in years, the table didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like a beginning. Later that night, after the plates had been cleared and the last glasses of cider sipped to silence, I stepped into the kitchen. My sanctuary. Miranda, my head chef and the backbone of this flagship, looked up from the pass window and grinned. So, how was dinner with the royals? I laughed. They choked on the pork, metaphorically and literally. She raised an eyebrow. The rub too spicy? No, I said. The truth was, we reviewed the spring menu changes, tasted a sliver of smoked belly for salt, adjusted the char on the seared loin. The usual rhythm of a closing shift grounded me like it always did. When the team finally wrapped up and the lights dimmed to the after-hours glow, I lingered near my office. I checked my phone. A message from Lillian. That was a lot, but thank you. Also, can we talk next week? I'd love to bring someone by the farm. No judgment, just curiosity. I smiled. Maybe she meant it. Maybe she didn't. But for the first time, she was reaching out not to correct me, but to understand me. I typed a short reply. Sure, wear boots. I turned off the kitchen lights and walked to the back patio or staff break area that overlooked the small herb garden we kept on site. Even in the city, I'd insisted we grow our own thyme and mint, basil and chives. A reminder of where it all began. The night was quiet, cool, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty but earned. I sat on the wooden bench by the rosemary bush and opened my leather-bound notebook, the one I used when things felt too big for screens. I wrote, I used to believe that success would feel like applause, but it doesn't. It feels like stillness, like peace, like not flinching when someone questions your path, because you no longer need to defend it. It feels like mud on your boots in a room full of crystal, and not caring. It feels like walking into a restaurant and knowing every scent, every story, every soul behind the dishes, because you built it. It feels like being the same girl they once called foolish, and not needing to prove them wrong anymore. I closed the notebook and looked up at the sky. The stars were dimmer here than on the farm, but they were still there, constant, like truth, like roots. And I knew, finally, I had come full circle. Not because they saw me now, but because I no longer needed them to.